Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Nicholas Davenport, aka Mr. Mental Muscle, here in Houston, Texas. We're on set here with Jorge Quintero, and we're going to talk about some things about his business, Neuro Gym. He's been a great host to us here in Houston. We've got some great food, and we talked a little bit off camera about how he got to this point. So I want to share this first of a 3-part series of how he got to creating Neuro Gym and his story. Then we're going to talk more about how we see the industry as practitioners, and then the third part will be how we look at the industry as a whole, because we have some good stuff we like about it, but then there's some criticisms, and that's how we get better, right? By criticizing. So with that being said, it's your turn. Take the stage and let's hear more about you.
All right. Thank you so much, Nicholas, for the opportunity to be on the podcast. It's a real pleasure, especially having you guys fly from Florida down to Houston. It really means a lot. So first of all, I want to thank you for that. So let's get started and talk a little bit about the journey. How did I get to the point of starting the Neuro Gym? Because the Neuro Gym, I call it USA's first athletics gym for brain health. And what that means is, brain health is an umbrella term that's vague, and it could be a little confusing because it's not super tangible. But I like to think about brain health as just how sharp, vigorous, and quick thinking your brain is for whatever you're doing in life, whether it's doing stuff at work, relationships, working out, going to sleep. Your brain is involved in all of these processes. And depending on how well your brain functions and works will greatly determine the outcomes in many of these areas of your life. So how did I create this exercise Neuro Gym program for brain health? It all started when I graduated as an electrical engineer, got into the field of engineering. I was designing chips for consumer electronics, and I really hated my job, to be honest with you. I loved my coursework. I loved the concepts of electrical engineering, but the day-to-day reality, being behind a desk, commuting 45 minutes each way, not being able to connect with my coworkers, it just wasn't an environment that I could see myself in long term. And I've always been very ambitious, very self-starting and disciplined. So I started considering entrepreneurship. And it got to the point in my job where I really didn't want to work there anymore. And I started learning about real estate. So I decided to pivot. I saved up some money in my bank account, about 6 months, and I quit cold turkey. And I decided to go all in into real estate, thinking that I was going to succeed if I just put all my time and effort into it. The reality obviously is different. You don't just switch from engineering to sales and marketing and have a smooth transition. There's a lot of skills that you have to develop and basically get mentored on. There's a lot of mistakes that you can make, but you can kind of shortcut that if you have a good mentor.
Why real estate, though?
Why real estate? Because I felt like it, as someone that grew up in a poor household, like I didn't inherit any money. I didn't have much capital. I obviously had the savings in my bank, but I saw it as a business opportunity that had a low barrier to entry and was accessible. So that's what I chose. And I loved the social aspect of real estate. I loved meeting new people every day. I loved hearing their stories. Every day was slightly different, even though the operations and the tasks are pretty similar. So, a few months go by in real estate. I'm working it full time. I'm still struggling. I'm not really making any money. And that's when I decided, like, okay, I got to take a step back. And this was key because this transition from real estate, struggling, basically working till I only had about 2 months of savings left. So had to really figure out what I was going to do. Ended up getting this job that I have now in the neurosurgery field. So I start this job that's a combination of engineering and sales. And I decided to fall back on this because I was like, okay, I like the people-facing aspect of real estate, but I just don't like the office environment of engineering. So let me find a hybrid. And that was that role is technical sales, they call it. So I started in technical sales. They have me supporting technology in the operating room with surgeons for something called deep brain stimulation. This was my first encounter with neurotechnologies, with like a patient, with the brain, with surgeons, neurologists. Like, it was a whole new field for me that I had never discovered before. And in the surgery, the patients have movement disorders, so they tremor, they have a shuffling gait, so they can't really walk well. They can't do a lot of activities that we kind of take for granted, like driving, bringing a cup of coffee to our lips, brushing our teeth, shaking someone's hand. And they start taking meds, but there's a certain point where these meds stop working. So they get this surgery, they come in with these symptoms, we stick a probe into their brain, we start shocking them in a specific point, and those symptoms go away. That was the first time I had seen anything like that, and it was miraculous. If you can look up deep brain stimulation, you can see for yourself the transformations in people that you can get basically by turning on a power switch. So that led me down a whole rabbit hole of, how does this work? Like, this is an incredible technology. And, in that study, it turns out that we don't really understand fully why it works. It's something that was discovered experimentally and then applied, and the science is kind of trying to reverse engineer the mechanisms, but they don't really understand why it works. In that process of learning about the brain, I became extremely passionate. I started learning about other neurotechnologies, including some of the things that you were doing with Mind Body One. And it really inspired me to think, wow, what are the commonalities between all these neurotechnologies and the things that are happening in the neuroscience space? And it's really that we're trying to change people's minds or their nervous system for the better, whether that's mental health, whether that's neurodegenerative disease, whether that's stroke or concussions. We're all just trying to change the brain to where it used to be, or to a better state. And that's how I kind of came across the NeuroGym as a potential therapeutic approach or modality to mental health problems. I learned about something called neurofeedback, where they're actively doing this right now. So they record brain activity from the scalp. They essentially compare this person's brain activity with a database to understand how this person's brain activity differs from the norm. Mm-hmm. And based on brain areas that are overactive or underactive, these correlate with symptoms that the person may be struggling with. And then they train that person's brain to a more normal state, quote unquote. And as you train this person's brain, they start exhibiting more neurotypical behaviors or symptoms, like less anxiety, less depression, more motivation, more focus, whatever you fill in the blank. With deep brain stimulation, we're forcing brain change by sticking a wire into a specific part of the brain and shocking it so it acts different. And that creates the outcomes of deep brain stimulation, where these patients can stop tremoring and they can walk more normally and speak more normally. So across all of these, we're implementing brain change. And I had learned that exercise is actually one of the most powerful tools to change the brain. Yep. So I asked, well, can't we combine exercise with mental health training methods and potentially get brain change that way? And it turns out, yes. You can not only get brain change benefits from implementing something like the NeuroGym, but you actually get boosted benefits compared to doing the brain training or the neuroplasticity training and the exercise separately. If you combine them, you actually get a 20 to 30% synergistic effect. So they actually complement each other. So that's kind of how I discovered the NeuroGym. And now I've been in business for about a year, let's say almost a year and a half. And every person that's come to me, whether it's depression, sleep issues, anxiety, ADHD, I'm about to start seeing someone that has rheumatoid arthritis. I've trained my dad who has a brain in his 60s, which supposedly, you can't teach a old dog new tricks, but he's been responding just as strongly as if he were young with this approach. So it doesn't matter the age, it doesn't matter the condition. We know from research that almost all of these mental health conditions, neurodegenerative conditions, injuries, they all improve with exercise. And if you can include some targeted exercises for the specific needs, specific brain needs of that person's, we can get great results. So I've been talking for a lot. I think I just want to stop there so we can unpack it a little bit. But that's kind of the journey.
Well, it goes to the fact that you said you wanted a hybrid job, and you kind of did that because for those who don't understand brain science to the degree we might, the brain is an electrical organ that it operates on impulses that send throughout the body to relay messages to say, do this, do that. And you literally did that as an engineer, but now you're doing it more for humans. So it's kind of interesting how you didn't really change your job per se. You just changed how you applied it.
Exactly.
Because you're not doing it for, you said, consumer products. Now you're doing it for humans and helping them be better, whatever their role. Like I said, demographic doesn't matter. The outcome is be better or revert to a former state or an improved state from where they are now. Because obviously they're coming to you, there's something not going quite right, whether it's anxiety, whether it's cognitive function, whatever it is. So that's something we'll talk more about in other parts of this series. But let's get to the point of the personal journey that kind of led you here too, because I know we mentioned some things off camera about experiences, because obviously we talked about this a lot, that giving that ability to relate gives a big benefit in a business where they can understand you and you can understand them. So let's talk a little about that.
Yeah. So why mental health? I chose mental health first and foremost because I see a need. You can go to any gym in the country, and I bet you 95% of trainers probably understand that exercise is good for the brain, it's good for your mental health. But if you ask them, okay, I have anxiety, I have depression, how should I train to get the most results or the best benefits? They won't be able.
There.
It stops there, right?
I see.
So that's the gap that the Neuro Gym is trying to fill. But from a more personal level, I definitely have my fair share of experiences with mental health. I had a very tumultuous childhood, grew up in poverty. My parents immigrated from Mexico before I was born. Because of like some small issues, they were unable to get like documentation and papers throughout my entire childhood. So they were working very menial jobs, barely making ends meet. It obviously took a toll on their mental health, which affected myself and my siblings. I was the oldest, or I am the oldest. And so I had to shoulder a lot of the burden when my dad fell into major depression. He developed psychosis, bipolar disorder. He became like very, very paranoid. He thought people were out to get him. He would like play hooky at work just because he wanted to. Like he would literally just leave his job site and go watch a movie kind of deal sometimes. So he couldn't hold a job. He was bouncing from job to job within a year's time frame of starting a job. It got to the point where when I was 16, I had to work a full-time job and give my full paycheck to my mom because she was working multiple jobs, still wasn't enough. I first would give my mom a big portion of my paycheck, but then she told me it wasn't enough, so I started giving her my full paycheck. Point is, I suffered from mental health issues during that period. I went through depression, went to go see a psychiatrist. He told me, no, you don't have major depression. It basically was a weird time. I definitely think I was in a bout of depression. Throughout my college years, I had a lot of anxiety because obviously I was separated from my family and they still were in the same position. Like my dad still struggling with the same mental health issues, not really making more money than they did when I was in high school. And that obviously took a toll on me stress-wise. And I think also I haven't been officially diagnosed, but I think I have symptoms of ADHD. So I, you know, bringing all of these experiences into NeuroGym is very personal to me. And like I said, I see a gap. So that's why I'm focusing on this specifically. I know what these people are going through. I know also that, my mental state right now doesn't necessarily mean my mental state tomorrow. So even though I did struggle with mental health, I ultimately got better through different choices or different environments. And I strongly believe that this could happen with the NeuroGym program too. We give people better inputs, better environment, some encouragement, and you can create magic in these individuals within 6 to 12 weeks.
So we'll wrap up with that on this part because, like I said, I want to go into different aspects, and that kind of segues perfectly. We're going to talk next episode about the practical aspects, how we actually do this in real time, because you mentioned how it can affect them and how beneficial it is. So let's get into that. So part one, pretty good. You know where you started, but we're going to talk next about where it's about to go. So stay tuned.